So I was able to watch the Lesbian Bar Project, and I was really impressed by the quality of the filmmaking. I just want to start off by asking you, on a personal level, how did you decide to become a filmmaker?
I remember I wanted to be a filmmaker since I was 10. I was raised by two therapists, and they were very, very adamant on introducing me to, uh, art and culture and film. And my dad was like, okay, you need to be literate in Scorsese by the time you're 12. So I was like introduced to like Mean Streets and Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, probably at too young of an age, but that's neither here or there. But so I was kind of transfixed by filmmaking, and there weren't that many women that I knew of that were directors. There were a smattering of a couple of examples, but for the majority of my childhood, I didn't really see anyone who looked like me behind the camera. So it wasn't until I got to high school and kind of was doing like self-education of like, oh, hey, there's like filmmakers like Mira Nair or Sally Potter or Jane Campion who are making waves, and they, happen to be women. So from there, I was just making my own stuff, completely self-taught. And then I got into NYU Film School and worked my way up. And after I graduated, I had done a lot of, working for other people. And basically, when the pandemic hit, I knew that I needed to focus on my directing career. I had pretty much exhausted all of my energy servicing other people's visions, and I figured it was time to service my own.
Well, I really like your work, and I want to just jump into your latest work on the Lesbian Bar Project, and maybe we can start with the history of lesbian bars. From what I understood, in the 1980s, there were around 200 lesbian bars, and now there are something like 21. How did that happen?
It's hard to pinpoint one reason, but we've been able to identify a couple of mitigating factors. So gentrification is affecting our coastal cities, especially, and all businesses owned and operated by marginalized people are affected by gentrification. So lesbian bars are definitely in the midst of not being able to afford rising rents and exorbitant taxes, and just all around a kind of city that doesn't necessarily have the space for them. And so that's gentrification is like a huge issue. In general, lesbian bars never occupied the same kind of space and real estate that gay bars did. There was a brief period in the 90s in New York where Park Slope was called affectionately Dyke Slope. And it had a kind of like a lesbian epicenter, but that was really, really fleeting. So besides that, lesbians never really took up neighborhoods in the same way that gay men did. So because of that, our space was already limited. So we were working off of, existing in spaces that were discreet or hard to find or not necessarily completely obvious. So that definitely affects how visible and accessible these spaces are. Assimilation plays a huge factor into it. I think that when gay marriage was legalized by the Supreme Court in 2015, I think the most privileged members of our community were kind of swept away with a bit of complacency. I have the immense privilege that I can walk down the street in my neighborhood and go to a bar that's not necessarily LGBTQ and feel safe. And that is because of the incredible work of the generations before me. But what's lost there is that there's a feeling that if we accept that we don't need specifically queer space, we're essentially saying that space in general can be heteronormative or should be heteronormative. And I'm, against that, because that doesn't reflect our population. Our population isn't just straight. It isn't just binary. And our bars are not just bars. They're cultural epicenters and spaces for intergenerational dialogue and for queer friendship and obviously dating sometimes. And if we don't have a space that reflects, specific groups, then, we lose power, we lose validity, we lose just, a way of life. So, kind of other factors. Obviously, the wage gap is real. There's not a lot of evidence that, especially white gay men are have wage discrimination. It's mostly the other members of the LGBTQ community, and obviously women make less than men. Women of color make less than white women, and queer women of color make even less. So that definitely affects the amount of leisure dollars that people have to go out to the bars. A lot of queer women also are parents, so a lot of their disposable income will go to their children rather than going out to a bar. And then finally, I think that overall we've been moving to an online culture. Online dating is definitely prevalent in most of our lives, but beyond that, just like the way we shop, the way we consume food, the way we kind of consume culture, the way we kind of like navigate serious conversations and kind of meet new people is online in a lot of ways. And, there's pros and cons to that. But I think also what we lose is, brick and mortar spaces in general, not just our lesbian bars, but all brick and mortar spaces are really suffering because of that.
So it's clear from what you said and from the film that the brick and mortar space plays a really important role for the lesbian community. How do you define a lesbian bar, and is it different from a gay bar or a queer bar?
It's a good question. Lesbian bars are spaces for all marginalized genders within the LGBTQIA community. So that's all queer women, regardless if they're cis or trans, non-binary people, and trans men. What makes lesbian bars different and distinct from gay bars is the prioritization of those genders that I just listed. Gay bars and queer bars in general, are not necessarily prioritizing queer women and their experiences. And what ends up happening is that, when I enter gay bars, for example, it's like, it doesn't necessarily feel like an 100% safe space for me. I think that there's a lot of different dynamics happening between gay men and queer women. I'm not saying that it's always a divisive relationship, but I think that there's a lot of like kind of misogyny and, internalized homophobia against queer women, which is really unfortunate, which I've experienced. But one thing that we do say in our film, it's really important, is that all of our bars, they identify as lesbian bars. And so like they'll identify as lesbian bar and queer space, because it's really, really important that our lesbian bars open their doors for the most vulnerable members of the community. And the most vulnerable members of the community right now are trans brothers and sisters and non-binary folks. As we can see with the, local legislation that's passing, throughout the Midwest and South, is that, they are not a protected class, and it's unfortunate, and it's something that I think, as I said earlier, our more privileged members of the community, don't necessarily have the same kind of energy and motivation to fight for trans rights, because it's like, okay, we got our gay marriage, we could probably stop, we can live rather safely now. And I think that's really disappointing, because our community has always been built around activism and has been built around political organization, and we need to support each other. And if we don't support our trans community, it does affect all of us.
So tell us about the first time you went into a lesbian bar and what that meant to you.
So I always like to say that Cubbyhole, the lesbian bar in Manhattan, knew I was gay before I even did. I walked in 2009, and I had been questioning. I had kind of admitted it to myself years prior, but I had been repressing it. And the minute I walked into Cubbyhole, I was so overtaken by this palpable and tangible energy of queer women. Even 2009, which isn't that long ago, I felt like there was such a kind of missing contingency of representation for our community. Like, I would watch like Lisa Chaldenko movie or like the L Word and kind of like get that. But in terms of my day-to-day life, I had no one. And when I walked into Cubbyhole, it was arresting. It was invigorating. It was electrifying that I not only just saw like, obviously like amazing, beautiful women around me, but it was more about like these people who were unapologetically themselves. And there was queer community, there was queer friendship, which often does not get represented or talked about enough, because for me, like lesbian bars are like far more than just like a place to hook up. That's actually like rarely what they're used for. It's really for a place to like, for me to be unapologetically myself and to be gay with my friends. And that is like such a lovely and, often overlooked experience. So when I walked into Cubbyhole, I knew deep down that the minute I was ready to come out, I would have a safe space to go to. And once I came out, once I started kind of living publicly as a gay woman, I found that, going to lesbian bars in the city, whether it was Henrietta Hudson, Cubbyhole, Ginger's, I had that space to be unapologetically and unabashedly myself. And I don't necessarily have that privilege everywhere I go.
So if hypothetically Cubbyhole or other lesbian bars in Manhattan or New York did not exist, what do you think your journey of self-acceptance would have looked like, or self-acceptance of others in their journeys would have looked like?
It definitely wouldn't have been as fun. I mean, I got to, I don't know, it's hard to say. I actually often ask myself this question of like, if I didn't go to NYU, if I didn't live in New York, like what my coming out process would be like. I can imagine that it would have been a lonelier experience. And I am really grateful that I had those spaces that I could just talk to all walks of life from. I mean, Cubbyhole is in a very international space. Like when I was there, I would meet people from, various countries in Europe. Like I met someone from Tunisia. I met someone from Yemen. And to talk to, someone from Yemen who was a queer woman was, I was thinking to myself, like, this is like truly a melting pot. And that's why these spaces are so important, because I would have not necessarily gotten the opportunity to speak with her. So yeah, I mean, I think that if I didn't have these bars, I wouldn't have given myself the opportunity to figure out who I was. And I think that a lot of times it's a misconception that like you come out once and then you're done. I have to come out almost every day of my life, especially as someone who can like appear straight passing. I think I've done a pretty good job at branding myself as like a queer woman. So there's a little less of that, but I think that these spaces allowed me to kind of not only come out in a way that I was met with community, but to also figure out the nuances of who I am within the LGBTQIA community. And those spaces were instrumental in that.
So tell me about when you first learned about the decline in lesbian bars in the United States. And when you learned about that, what compelled you to start the Lesbian Bar Project?
So, as we all remember, the pandemic hit New York City in March 2020. And I had nothing but time for the first time in a while to kind of reflect on the importance of gathering, the importance of safe space. And I was on the phone a lot with my friend Alina, and we were just kind of processing the shutdown of our industry, as filmmakers, and just kind of the shutdown of our day-to-day lives. And this coincided with a couple of articles coming out about the dearth of lesbian bars in the country, how that there was only, 16 or 15 left. And that really scared me. And it was a wake-up call, because I consider myself pretty ingrained in the community, and I didn't even know the numbers were so bad. So Alina and I spoke about it, and we were like, okay, let's do something about this. So she and I kind of like got our heads together and we're like, let's tell the stories of these bars as filmmakers. So we we teamed up with a couple of producers too, and we birthed the Lesbian Bar Project. In 2020, we set out to do a PSA, and we knew that we wanted it to be also branded because one, brands can pay for it, and as queer artists, like we need funding, and two, it would get the kind of exposure that we knew that this project deserved. So we, pitched it to a couple of brands. Obviously, alcohol brands were an obvious and like symbiotic option. So we pitched to a couple brands, and Jägermeister made us a wonderful offer, and they were just such incredible partners to us, and really believed in the project and, support the queer community, not just during Pride, but every day of the year. So we also teamed up with Leah Delaria, who it was really important to us to have like a voice for the community. And Leah is one of the few like out queer women celebrities who actually still patronize the bars. Like she's a regular at Cubbyhole, and she like, that's like her spot. And so it was like, really an easy choice to go to her and say, hey, can you like represent the project? And she was like, of course. She like literally, we sent her the offer and like 30 seconds later we were on the phone with her. So I have never experienced that before. So we launched our PSA in October 2020. We weren't really able to film a lot in person because the pandemic was still raging. So we relied heavily on archival, and we released a 90-second PSA and went on to raise over $100,000 for the bars. One thing that we always wanted to do was, obviously, we're filmmakers, storytelling driven first, but also we wanted to add a philanthropic element. So that's where the money comes in with the pool fund. And, we raised $117,000 that was split evenly amongst the bars. We knew that we weren't done telling the stories of these bars. And also throughout the campaign, a couple of bars, we got a couple of emails from the community members saying like, oh, you might have missed this bar and this bar. So we did more research, and we had done months of research prior to the release of the PSA. And there's not many studies on or statistics on the amount of lesbian bars in the country. So we were relying on a couple of studies, a couple of articles, and a couple of just like anecdotal evidence, but it's really, they're difficult to find. So we discovered a couple more. So this year, when we decided to do the Lesbian Bar Project again, we announced a list of 21 bars. And we always say it's, an estimated number. There's like, still like new bars opening, there's bars closing. Like, it's hard to necessarily pinpoint one number, but 21 is the closest we've gotten. And earlier this year in June, we released a 20-minute documentary. And this time, we introduced the world to this staggering statistic that there were few lesbian bars left in the country. And now we wanted to tell the human stories behind these bars. So our film is through the lens of the bar owners, community activists, patrons, and archivists. And they tell the stories of not just, the bars themselves, but how it affects our lesbian culture. And I think that, if there's few bars left in the country, it begs the question, do we still need them? And what is the future for queer women?
So, corporate investment sometimes gets a bad name, but it sounds like Jägermeister was really a good partner and came in with the best of intentions and really allowed you to get this moving forward, the project moving forward. I also wanted to just, when Leah Delaria from the fame of Orange is the New Black came in, do you really think that gave your project a boost and a lot more recognition?
Definitely. I mean, Leah is such an icon, and she has an immense following, not just from Orange, but just from her body of work for the past decades. So it gave us even more credibility, which was really important to us because we wanted to, cement ourselves in the zeitgeist. And I think we were really successful in that because there are many, many people who I've met who are like, oh, I've heard of your project. I've heard about the dwindling number of lesbian bars. And I think a year ago, that wasn't the case. So I think we succeeded in that. And Leah is a wonderful champion of these bars, and she has a big following. To your point about Jägermeister, yeah, there's, obviously rainbow capitalism is at play with the kind of relationship between corporations and the queer community. And I think some people are very transparent in how they, kind of exploit the queer community for their own financial gain. I think Jägermeister differentiated themselves because, they gave us money and supported us in September and October of last year. They could have easily said like, oh, we'll wait for like Pride, month, but they had also launched something called #SaveTheNight, which was an initiative to help nightlife institutions and venues that were disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So they did a lot of great work helping spaces, stay afloat during the pandemic. And that was really attractive to us because we were like, okay, they're, actually doing the work to support the community that, and I think that a lot of queer people work in nightlife. A lot of nightlife people are queer. And I think that it just felt like a really good relationship. So they're incredibly supportive. They, help fund our 20-minute film. And they're, big advocates and are some of the reason why we got, so much press as well.
So you mentioned in the film about recent generations not being aware of the struggle and sacrifice that went into places like Cubbyhole. And can you tell me a little bit about the activists who actually laid the groundwork so that these spaces could exist?
Yeah, so there's, people like Stormy DeLaveray, who was arguably the first person who threw a punch at Stonewall. And Lisa Canastrossi, the owner of Henrietta Hudson, talks about her with such reverence. They were friends. Stormy worked at the kind of original Cubbyhole, which is confusing. The original Cubbyhole is where Henrietta Hudson is now. And then they moved to deeper into the West Village. So Stormy worked there and was one of the bouncers there. And, was an incredible force and someone who kind of broke gender norms from, during a time that was there wasn't even language for that. And then we talked to so many people who were on the front lines of the movements, whether it was in the 70s or, the 90s, which we kind of saw a resurgence of the lesbian chic movement. One thing to note is that lesbian bars had a divisive history. I think that there's a lot of cases where these bars were discriminatory against, women of color. We talk about that in the film. For example, the bar Bonnie and Clyde. On one hand, the owner, Elaine Ravanoli, was, revolutionary in the sense that she was able to own and operate a bar in the 1970s as a single woman. The women weren't even allowed, as a lot of us know, weren't even allowed to get a line of credit without the approval of their husbands or fathers, let alone a liquor license. So there was something, incredibly admirable about what she did. But on the other hand, her bar had a race-based quota, and they would allow 2 or 3 Black women into their doors. And, and during brunch service on a Sunday, Black women were served different food than their white counterparts. So in response to that, folks like Audre Lorde were part of the organizing founding members of the Salsa Soul Sisters, which is the first Black and Latina lesbian organization in the country. So we felt it was really important to talk about them in our film because that is part of lesbian bar culture. And they weren't able to necessarily occupy space in the same way that white women were in terms of traditional bar settings, but the spaces where they were able to occupy served the same purpose that the lesbian bars, brick and mortar spaces did. So we spoke to a lot of members of the Salsa Soul Sisters. And then we also, some folks that we didn't get to include in the film, for example, Leslie Cohen, who opened Sahara, was one of the founding members of Sahara, a kind of pivotal bar in the 1970s in New York. And she talked a lot about how the bars were often mob run, and she wasn't able to get a liquor license, and she wasn't even able to sign a lease. And she was an unmarried woman, and she an unmarried gay woman, and she had to. I mean, she speaks about how ridiculous this is, but like the only like the closest like male relative she had was her brother, who was unfortunately at the time institutionalized. So he was able to sign on her behalf, but if you look at it in the vacuum, it's completely ridiculous that she wasn't able to sign on her own behalf for a liquor license for a lease when, you know, she was like able to function, whether, and her brother was sick. So, you know, we talked to her, and Sahara had to close 4 years into its lifespan, and she was part of the movement to kind of start the queer party scene. So, yeah, I mean, those were kind of a couple. There's so many more people I'm leaving out, but you know, there's just so many different aspects of the community that I like that we don't even have time to talk about, which is unfortunate.
Well, I know that one of the bars that is featured in the Lesbian Bar Project is a bar called Hers in Mobile, Alabama, run by two African American women, which is fairly unique because you make the point in the film that there are almost no bars except for that one, and maybe another one that is run by Black or brown women. Um, can you talk a little bit about that? And I mean, to own a bar in Mobile, Alabama, where there's so much, you know, homophobia, that must be a difficult business to run. But maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
So when we met Rachel and Sheila Smallman, the owners of Hers, it was like love at first sight. They have such a effervescent energy. And they are just wonderful, wonderful human beings, and we're obsessed with them, and they're obsessed with us, and it's like a mutual love that's really exciting. But when we first started talking to them, you know, it was really interesting to us. We knew we needed to go down to Mobile because of what you're saying, because they are the only lesbian bar on our list that is owned and operated by Black women, and it. One thing that they talk about is that they started the bar as a reaction to feeling discriminated, not just by heterosexual people, by gay men in the South as well. And I think that in the South, and it's in spaces that are not coastal cities in the United States, it's like these bars are really melting pots for like the entire community, because there is such a lack of safety in many of the spaces. Like I talk about how in Brooklyn, New York, I could walk down the street into a bar and hold my girlfriend's hand and feel okay, but that's not necessarily true of space in the South or the Midwest. I think that one thing that was important, though, is that Mobile, Alabama is a really dynamic and nuanced city. There's, my expectations were definitely different than what I experienced. Granted, I was surrounded by queer people because we were following a lesbian bar in Mobile, but I think that there's definitely a really loud and active vocal contingency of people who are accepting, who are not just, you know, queer people, but are allies who are trying to make change and difference there. So I think that it's not monolithic, and that's really important. But yeah, I mean, Rachel and Sheila, you know, are defying a lot of odds by opening that space. I mean, Hers is an electric space. Everyone there is greeted with a hug. You know, Sheila walks people to their cars to ensure safety. The staff is incredibly welcoming. It really is like a home away from home. And that was what we wanted to capture when we were filming. It's a space where the community can gather and be themselves, where they might not necessarily be able to in their day-to-day lives.
So, Erica, can you talk a little bit about your own personal activism in the LGBTQ community, and maybe how do you believe that younger generations can or will become more involved?
Yeah, so I think that there's definitely a generational gap. There's kind of an older guard that talks about, you know, which we point out in our film, that like, you know, younger generations don't know what we went through. And that's something that it's important for us to listen and to educate ourselves as younger people about really what older queer people went through in order to have the rights that we do today. On the flip side of that, I think that, and once again, this is more anecdotal than anything, but I think that there's a kind of sometimes a resentment from older generations about the nuances in language, the nuances in gender expression and identity that has emerged in the past 10 years. And I think that older generations can learn something from us too, and learn something that we don't have to be so militant in our definition of, for example, lesbianism. Like, I make the point throughout my life that, like, yes, I identify as lesbian, I identify as gay, I identify as queer, but I think that many people can use that label of lesbian, and it doesn't mean, that it's just a cis woman who's only attracted to other cis women. I think that there's more room for different kinds of people to use that label, and that's beautiful. I think that, one thing we tracked in our film is this disparity between kind of like an older guard of like what it means to be a gay person and have like queer space versus what our current generation means. Henrietta Hudson changed their logo after 30 years, and it was more of like a femme presenting person. And then it changed to, something that is gender inclusive. And there was backlash. I mean, Henrietta Hudson got backlash on Instagram. We got backlash for including them in our campaign. Henrietta Hudson started identifying as a queer human bar built by lesbians. And for us, that still met our definition of a lesbian bar. And I think that there were certain people who felt really, really disappointed and felt betrayed because they felt that the women-only spaces were disappearing, and that one of the few institutions that still kind of identified as a women-centered space was now using gender inclusive labels and logos. And Lisa Kanastashvi, the owner of Henrietta Hudson, had the best response I've ever heard to that complaint. She said, you thought 10, 20, 30 years ago that you were in a women-only space, a gay women-only space, but you were wrong. There were trans men there. There were non-binary people there. There were bisexual and pansexual people there. Those people have always been part of the lesbian community. And now we have the language to include them. And we have the language to make them feel seen and not make them feel isolated. And as I said earlier, I think that we can do better than our gay male counterparts. We can do better than kind of the more privileged members of the community, where we can open our doors to many different kinds of people. And I think that it's a responsibility and a wonderful gift that, lesbian bars can give to the community.
So let's talk a little bit about allyship. And do you feel it's important to have non-queer allies in the effort to save these bars in general?
That's a really good question. And I think that one thing that we just need to talk about in general is that most of these bars survive because of allyship. As I stated before, there's, the wage cap is absolutely devastating. And most of these bars rely on allies and straight people to come to their bars and spend money. I think that it's, they can't, especially lesbian bars, can't survive alone on just queer populations patronizing their spaces. I do, however, think that there's a way to support lesbian bars and to support gay bars and queer spaces without, overtaking the space. So, for example, a lot of gay bars have banned straight bachelorette parties because I find that like completely inappropriate. It's like you're going to like kind of like flaunt your heteronormativity in a space that has like fought to kind of like counteract that. And I think that it's really important that when you are a straight ally, when you come into a space that's, not made for you, you're a guest, and you have to be deferential to the people that are prioritized in that space. So, for example, it's not like, I think that a way to support it, it's like spend your money there, buy drinks, hang out with your queer friends, maybe don't throw a bachelorette party at a gay space if you're a straight person. Maybe don't like kind of like invite like a bunch of straight people into that space and kind of like occupy and take up room that would have, so that means that queer people can't access it. And one thing is like be really mindful of not harassing queer women. There's unfortunately a lot of cases where straight men will come into lesbian spaces and like harass and sexualize us. And, at the end of the day, that's like a bigger systemic issue that a lot of straight men feel that queer women's sexuality is for them and made for them as a presentation to them. And that's completely untrue. And we like exist as people outside of their gaze. So I think that it's, I'm not advocating for, exclusionary practices in any regard. I think that there's no like check at the door of like, who are you? Like, you can't be here. I'm actually like, pretty against spaces like, how like the wing used to operated that was like women only. Like, I'm pretty against that. Like, I don't think that there should be mandates at the door about like which genders are allowed into a space. I do think, however, that if you're as a straight ally, if you're walking into a queer women's space, that you need to realize that and that you're not the priority there.
So, during the making of the film, what surprised you the most that you learned about lesbian bars, and maybe you could give us a favorite story from the bars that you visited.
One of the things that surprised me actually was a bar from the past, Meow Mix, that we cover in the film briefly, and it was around in the 90s in the Lower East Side. And obviously, I knew that queer bars and queer establishments had a really complicated and often turbulent relationship with the police. But one thing that was interesting talking to Brooke Webster, who was the owner of Meow Mix, is that Giuliani's administration was actually kind of their biggest foe in terms of their like own kind of survival. Basically, like, there was mandates and there was laws and legislation that was passed to be, predatorial to, marginalized business owners and that service marginalized people. So like there'd be like code violations that were like completely insane that would essentially enact a shutdown. So one thing that she had to navigate, there was like kind of this kind of whisper network of people who were in nightlife spaces that'd be like, oh, someone from the mayor's office is here, or like, do X, Y, Z. So what they would essentially do is the mayor's office would give so many fines to certain bars that they had to shut their doors. And I thought that was something that like, Giuliani talked a lot about his like cleanup efforts, and his cleanup efforts were, in a lot of ways just like completely try to erase, marginalized people, whether they are people of color or queer people or women-centric spaces. So that was like really interesting to learn. Obviously I knew his administration was completely unfavorable and completely violent towards a lot of marginalized people, but to kind of learn the specifics of how they kind of shut down these spaces was interesting. And then I think learning about, as we talked about earlier, just like truly how egregiously racist some of these bars could be. I think I obviously knew that, there was racism in their spaces, but to learn specifically that there were race-based quotas at the door, to me was really disturbing and something that we need to start talking about as a community. And I think that there's still like, numerous reparations to be done in order to make queer women of color feel safe in lesbian bars and feel welcome in lesbian bars. Our goal for the future of the Lesbian Bar Project is to tell more of the stories of these bars and kind of go outside of the parameters we set in the 20-minute film. And a lot of the bars we've talked to, just like throughout the process, have like the owners have like amazing stories. Like Audrey Corley, the owner of Boycott Bar in Phoenix, talks about how she bought her first bar for $3 and has this insane story of how she was able to do that. And, I think that we're really excited to kind of continue the project to, tell more of these stories behind the bars.
So let's talk a little bit about how people. I know that the Lesbian Bar Project is available to view for free. Maybe you could talk about how people can access that, and also, I know you did a fundraiser and it was successful. Are you continuing to raise funds to help these bars?
So people can watch the film for free going to lesbianbarproject.com. It's also on the Jägermeister YouTube page, global YouTube page. And it's 20 minutes and feel free to watch and enjoy. People can also follow along the project on our Instagram, which is at Lesbian Bar Project. We did another fundraising campaign this past Pride. We are also announcing on tomorrow a new partnership with the dating app Hinge. So they are raising awareness and giving funds to the Lesbian Bar Project, which is really exciting. That will go to the pool fund for the bars, making a contribution. So basically, we, after our partnership with them ends in the around Labor Day, we're going to announce our total number raised. But it is we were able to raise over $100,000 again for the bars, which is really exciting. So our grand total for the money we raised during the pandemic will be over $200,000, which is incredible, and we're really excited about that. We'll be announcing specific numbers around Labor Day. And in terms of like more fundraising, I think the goal right now is to get people to go to the bars. That's always been a goal of mine and Alina's, is to say like, hey, please go to the bars. Like, you can give money to us, but like the most important thing is support our bars, show up for your bars. We literally say that at the end of the film. And we're actively working on, turning this into an episodic docuseries. So that's our priority right now.
So I know one of the goals is to help these bars that exist to continue to survive. Do you feel that your project will lead to more bars opening across the country?
Yes, we're actually already seeing that. We followed Joe McDaniel, Rage Pike, who are opening As You Are Bar. It was really important to us to follow a new space that's opening, because often how we talk about lesbian bars is through loss, disappearance, and trauma. And it was really important to us to show like, hey, here's a new lesbian and queer space that's opening that is, filled with optimism and filled with excitement. And we're getting so many messages from people around the country opening new lesbian bars. There's a spot in Astoria that's trying to open right now called Dave's. There's a spot in LA called Hot Donna's that's trying to open. And so we're really excited. And I think that there's going to be a lot more in our future. And I can't wait to go to those spaces and to witness them.
And maybe you could talk about what you learned about yourself through this whole journey of making the film. I know there were very many emotional moments. I saw an interview you did on PBS NewsHour in which people were, writing back comments that were, making you extremely emotional. So maybe you can talk about like what the whole project did for you personally.
I love this question. No one has actually ever asked me this question. I think that it did so much. I mean, it made me feel whole again.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to leave with telling our audience different things that they can do to support what you're doing. We said, go and watch, and I've watched it, and I would recommend anyone to watch it, because I think it's a very well done piece of film with a strong message, the Lesbian Bar Project. Anything else that people can do if they want to get involved and contribute and help lesbian bars to continue in the United States?
Go to our website. There's a map of the United States, and we show where every lesbian bar is located. Show up for your bars. Our pool fund is closed, and thank you for everyone who donated this year. But for now, what folks can do, watch our film, support us on social media, and show up for your bars.